up on Mountain Hermeneutics, we're talking the OG covenant, Father Abraham. So keep it right here. You're listening to Mount Hermeneutics, where three Marines give their perspective on God, faith, and spirituality with a heavy lean on the divine council worldview. This is not your grandma's Sunday school, nor is it always for the Christian faint of heart. Nothing about who we are or what we say make us experts. But you better believe we'll have a take, and perhaps it won't suck.
I'm apparently I'm bi-polytheist curious or something. I don't know.
Sorry. So unprofessional. You'll edit this out, right?
Maybe. We'll see. We'll see how generous I'm feeling.
And remember that this show is free and available on all podcast platforms, including YouTube, simply by searching for Mount Hermeneutics. Please subscribe wherever it is that you're listening to this thing, and tell your friends and family and whoever else that might want to watch it. Just go ahead and watch it. Turn it on. And if it's your first time with us, I am Andre, and these are my friends, Brian and Matt. Fellas, what's going on?
Hey.
Is that right?
Everybody. And by the way, even if you don't like people, tell them about our show.
Yeah,
not just your friends, so people you don't like. Maybe they'll like it more than you.
Or maybe you hate us and you want them to come in.
Yeah. Put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby.
Yeah, bring it. As you say, I have a little bit different background because I'm in actual Zion. This is down the road, Zion National Park. I'm in St. George, Utah, because for some reason, I mean, I can read. It says Zion, so I don't know what you know about where Zion is, but it's obviously in Utah because the map says so. Matt, what's up, man?
That tracks, man. Lots going on. My wife just passed her motorcycle safety foundation course. So she's officially a licensed motorcycle driver, which is the technical term for it, not rider. Even though
is she riding up to Aurora to go deal with some Venezuelan?
Yeah, we're gonna roll out with the Hells Angels. I gotta hang it. Soon we drop this call. We gotta skedaddle. No,
so glad we live in a red state.
Right. But so I was out yesterday, today. She did it on Friday, Saturday, and we were just out riding around town, terrorizing the suburban city of Moore, Oklahoma on our motorcycles. Yeah, it's different watching your wife ride who's never ridden before. It's a little unnerving. Yeah. And then the real crazy thing is my son went and watched her yesterday, and he looks at me and he's like, I think I want to take the class. And I was like, oh yeah? So he's like been texting me today. He's like, is a Honda Shadow a good starter bike? So he's like checking bikes on Facebook Marketplace, and we'll see.
You have a list on a bike
sometimes.
Your whole family just rolling up loudly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good times. What's up with you, Brian? What's good?
Gosh, I feel like I have a lot going on, but it feels exciting to me, but it would be boring to go into. I got back from my annual convention.
You were rolling around Back to the Future.
Yeah, we had a DeLorean at our convention. I worked for a petroleum geology association, and we had a DeLorean on the convention floor. So I asked my boss, who arranges all that stuff, like, what is that? What's the tie into geology? And he just kind of looked at me funny. He's like, there isn't one. Who cares? We have a DeLorean.
That's the correct answer.
All right, that is the correct answer.
All right.
Why are you asking such questions? Like, what are you doing?
Well, someone will ask, and someone will be mad if it doesn't tie in. So I came up with a bunch of post hoc rationalizations for
little retcon action. You're like, well, clearly,
sedimentology is like a real life flux capacitor. It makes time travel possible. But really,
the
if somebody
rocks and
asked,
stones themselves will start to sing Hosanna.
Right. But that's how you tell, like, where in the what geological epoch.
Right. No, I get it. I know what it's more of a map than a flux capacitor, but okay, I'll
just go with it.
I'll go with it. I don't want to.
really the best answer to give is somebody asks that is to just look at them and say, "Do you have in geology, bro?"
Right. My answer would, if ask me, let's role play. Ask me the question, Brian.
What's it have to do with geology?
Great Scott! That's all you say. You just
That came up.
21.1
That came up.
gigawatts.
yeah.
Yeah.
What the hell is a gigawatt? You just run off. Yeah.
He's throwing.
I
He's like,
want-
why is everything heavy? I don't know.
So,
Is there something wrong with the gravitational pull in the future?
so of course I rewatched the movie
Right.
recently because I just saw the DeLorean. I wanted to
Sure.
relive it, and I thought of something that kind of ruined the whole franchise for me.
Only
Oh.
you just thought of something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, no, not just now, but while I was watching, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. Well, that ruins all the tension of the movie. Do you want to hear it? Do you want me to
Sure.
ruin Back to the Future?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Hey, for anybody that's listening, spoiler alert.
Yeah. Don't like if you don't
The
want
movie's
Back to the
40
Future
years
ruined,
old, but okay.
Hey.
you need to skip. You need to skip ahead like 30 seconds, maybe a minute. Skip ahead a minute. So if Doc had failed to connect that cable to the lightning rod and like, oh no, the lightning's gone. What are we gonna do now? All I had to do was just like, hey, Doc, in the future, remember to put some spare plutonium in the trunk.
Yeah.
And then they could just walk over and open the trunk, and there it is. And
What
now,
is this, Bill and Ted's?
I know. It depends on which version of space-time you adhere to, right?
giving him
Because-
the letter saved him from the Libyans.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's no reason he couldn't also, P.S., don't forget to put some plutonium in there.
Before the Libyans
Stupid.
show up.
Right. In fact, put a function, put like a failsafe in the time machine so that it won't launch unless you've got like some
Two
plutonium.
charges. You have a
Right,
return
like
charge.
you-
Yeah.
Maybe you can disable it if you know you
Yeah.
don't need a return
Yeah. I'm with you.
trip. But yeah, I just
And why are we fighting Libyans? Like what? What was
they-
going
they-
on in 1980?
well, they wanted that.
They were trying to
The-
establish nuclear power and
Yeah, they were-
plutonium wasn't yet regulated.
They were super bad guys in the 80s.
That's my point. Like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Libyans. Like
Yeah.
if my son watches, like what?
Yeah, he needs to Google Muammar Gaddafi and the fact that Gaddafi used to have a son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that so spoiler over. So
if I had a DeLorean and I went back to say Genesis 12, maybe
Get
Genesis
that.
15,
yeah.
and just ask Abraham, like, hey, so what was it about this God Most High that you decided to follow him and not the other gods that you've been chilling with in Babylon all this time? What do you think Abraham would say to me, Brian?
Gosh, I don't know.
Okay. Well,
He's I don't like I would just be speculating, but I mean God spoke to him, of course, and Abram believed him, encountering him. But what's interesting to me is that Abraham's story does not start in Genesis 12. It starts in Genesis 11, and it says that he and his father and his brother and their families, they had already left Ur of the Chaldeans. And just for background, I guess we should tie this into the Divine Council worldview. This is after the Tower of Babel incident. God had disinherited the nations, but centuries later, some indeterminate length of time later, Abram and his family is in the city of Ur of the Chaldeans, which is in the area of Babylonia. And there's been a ton of archaeological work in that region in the past century. And so they had a pretty prominent ziggurat there. They worshipped all the old gods of Babylon there. But it reads that Abram and his father and brother and their families left Ur to go to Canaan, but they let me look at this to make sure I get this right. Was Terah became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran became the father of Lot. While his father Terah was still alive, Haran died in Ur of the Chaldeans, the land of his birth. Abram and Nahor both married. Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot, son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the wife of his son Abram, and together they set out from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. And so they were already, the family was already planning to relocate to Canaan, but for whatever reason, we don't know why they were doing that. And we don't know why they decided to settle in Haran, which isn't that far away, instead of going all the way to Canaan. But it was at that point that Yahweh said to Abram, leave your country and your people and your father's household and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation and I will bless you. I will make your name great and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, and all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you. So from that, I would gather that there was already some kind of, and this is totally speculative. There's already some kind of dissatisfaction with the gods of Babylon that they wanted to leave. Maybe God called Terah first, and Terah, failed to follow through, but so he moved on to Abram. But anyway, the text doesn't say that, but something got them to leave Ur of the Chaldeans to go to Canaan, but they stopped. So make of that what you will.
I think it's interesting that, when I asked you that, and you said, well, because Yahweh spoke to him. Well, Yahweh spoke to a few people before that, and they still didn't follow him. So
Right.
it's interesting to me that you have God speaking to you, and apparently we have a bunch of gods speaking to people all over the place. So, we have individuals choosing not to follow the one true God because they're, I don't know, enamored by other gods. And this is where the divine council worldview comes in. We just because you don't follow a certain God does not mean, I mean deity, not necessarily God, doesn't mean that those forces or the people in this unseen realm don't exist. So I think that's interesting to me. That
I think that's an interesting point, Dre. Like, I think before I fully appreciated the idea of the true supernatural nature of the ancient Near East, I think that point that you're making, that how could you hear the voice of a deity and not go, got it? Right? Like we always joke when we're watching a horror movie, and the white family, it's always a white family, right? Goes into some house and they hear get out, and they were like, they weren't talking to us. And then they stay, right? Like if I heard a voice tell me to get out, I get out. Like I leave. Right? Like I probably didn't even hear the out.
Not if I made a down payment on that house. I'm not.
Oh man.
Well,
that's my house now.
I was wondering why I was getting a good
I will
deal on this
I will
house.
commit insurance fraud before I stay in that house.
You can prove it was arson. Wasn't me. Wasn't me.
But the point I was making, Brian, I think you're about to respond, is that it really leaves you it makes a lot more sense when you recognize that there were potentially other Elohim that were either attempting to affect humanity or had affected humanity to some level, such that humans were very comfortable going, I know you heard Yahweh talking to you, but this Baalal's way cooler, or enter other name of other false god. It really makes you think, like, were they hearing other conversations also? And clearly those just aren't captured in our scripture, because to think that you could have a bush catch on fire and talk to you and go, nah, that's not worth taking into consideration. I'm not going to take that under advisement. I'm going to go do the thing I've been doing, right? And I'm jumping ahead to the stuff with Moses, right? Okay. And when Moses is leading these people out and they're seeing these signs, they're seeing, the Red Sea parting, and then they still couldn't wait for Moses to come down from Sinai before they were back to worshiping the other gods and whatnot. Like that just really kind of, it messes with me.
It makes you think of the Indian in that meme. This is with his hand on his hip, like what?
Yeah. Like, what's it going to take for you guys to take this seriously? Yeah.
Well, and I think that does raise an interesting question. Like, what was it like? and I guess I think I'm restating your question, Dre, and it's
Right.
one I hadn't really thought about till you asked it. So it's a good question. But so Abram is living in Ur of the Chaldeans, where they're worshiping, all the old gods of Babylon, the gods that they were deliberately seeking after at the Tower of Babel, and for which God disinherited humanity. It's interesting that God would choose a family from that region to call them out of there, but there's the question of why would Abram trust Yahweh, but not those other gods that were, the patron deities of Ur and Babylonia. And how do you know this God is trustworthy and not that one?
Right.
And was
my,
he?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
My speculation is that this God actually, I don't know how to put this, but it is actually made a covenant. I don't know if those other ones made those types of things. I think this God's like, hey, I am also, if you're righteous towards me, I promise you all of these things.
And then he did thing, so they saw.
And then he did the things, and I think also is that, and this kind of goes into my speculation of faithfulness or faith not necessarily being behavioral. Abram still lies. All the people of the Old Testament still did piece of shit people type things, but they still had faith. So I think an immature mind might say something like, hey, even though I might do depraved things, I still am righteous because I truly believe and trust this God. And I think that if that promise is made up front by said deity, then I think he's like, hey, maybe we're onto something. I've heard Muslims talk about the reason why they pray 5 times a day is because they don't know what might happen. Right? Like Allah might change his mind and be angry, and you have to sort of constantly appease him. So maybe the gods,
he's capricious, and
like the gods of that time, maybe they had to constantly do these things and make these prayers and sacrifices and stuff.
Well,
where
that
Yahweh
goes...
just came and said, hey, look, you, me, your family, I'm making this promise, and I will always be here with you and always for you.
And Dre, that actually tracks if you think about the idea of the other Elohim not actually being all powerful, right? Because they're asking for potentially, I don't know, like we're kind of making this up, right? But you kind of assuming that these false gods are asking for being followed, they're asking for respect and all those things. And then they tell them they're going to give them stuff, but they can't. And so when their inability to fulfill a covenant, to your point, then the people are like, well, maybe we need to try harder. We need to, we need to sacrifice more because the sacrifice didn't satisfy this fake God. And they don't know it's a fake God, right? They think it's they think it's an all-powerful God.
The forces of nature aren't changing at the behest of my sacrifice.
Yeah.
Well, but if you read the literature, if the Enuma Elish and the ancient Near Eastern literature, of which Genesis and the Book of Enoch are kind of the answer, like they believe like these Apkallus, these divine beings, they deliver on what the people sought them for. They built the Tower of Babel to kind of reinstate the arrangement of Mount Hermon, whereas the Watchers descended to Earth and they took human women and fathered.
But did they deliver again after the first time?
The Babylonians certainly thought so.
They thought so, right?
And they, in exchange for sexual access to human women, they gave them knowledge of magic and metallurgy and warfare and all kinds of forbidden knowledge. And the Babylonians credited their success as an empire to the Apkallus giving them this knowledge. So people did seek these gods for their own ambitions and empowerment and enrichment. And these gods, apparently, according to the literature, according to the culture, they delivered. But what's interesting about, in contrast, like Abram and his family were leaving that city, were leaving that region to presumably, we don't know why. I like to think it was because they wanted to get away from that culture and the worship of those gods, but we don't really know. There's a lot of extra biblical stuff speculating along those lines, and it seems plausible. But in contrast to the motivation to seek the favor of the Watchers or Apkalus and the old gods of Babylon, what you have in the call of Abram, yeah, it sounds pretty good. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great. But here it turns, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Like, it's not just I'm going to make you a great nation because I like you, and so you're gonna be on easy street. But through you, I'm going to bless all of humanity. And Abram was apparently the kind of guy that, like, yeah, I want to be a blessing to all humanity. It's not you're going to conquer all of humanity. You're going to be the ruler, and all humanity will be subjugated under your feet. It's you will be a blessing to all humanity. And Abram apparently, responded well to this promise. This was something he wanted, and it's like in contrast to the gods of Babylon, to the Watchers and the Apkalus, who offer power, and
they were king makers, right?
Right.
Kingdom makers.
Right.
Abram, in contrast, he, I will make you a blessing. I think that's it's so much like more pro humanity than it's so beautiful in contrast to what was in practice at the time. It's not, sacrifice your firstborn. Well, that came up later, but
right.
But that was a routine sacrifice in the ancient world. Child sacrifice, all this perverse, sexual ritual.
All sounds relevant to today, right? Like,
yeah,
you sacrifice your firstborn, you can still be a movie star.
Mm-hmm.
You can still be a rock star instead of the burden of raising a child. But I suppose that's for a different topic / conversation.
Well, but it is worth noting that, like, these aren't, we're not reading ancient stories that are no longer relevant. They are 100% relevant to today. They're written in a cultural language that we kind of have to unpackage to access that relevance, but it's 100% what's going on. So, but yeah, bottom line, I think the nature of the promise and just the universal benevolence of that promise, it wasn't just I'm going to give you power and make you great, but you're going to be a blessing. I think that's what Abram was trusting and hoping in, and I think that's such a stark contrast to anything else at the time.
And I think some of the responses by Abram too, a little bit later on when his nephew Lot gets captured because Sodom is at war with other kings in the region, and he's like, "Hey, I gotta go get my nephew Lot," but he didn't say a prayer like, "Hey, make me powerful." He's like, "Okay, I'll go get him. I'll take these 318 guys, and we're gonna go into this dangerous area," and didn't even question it. Didn't pray for his safety. Just went in there, got his nephew back, and then came back righteous.
Maybe Uriel went with him.
maybe Uriel had his hands full earlier, so I think maybe he had like the badass Gabriel. Just go ahead and get him. Nothing's gonna happen to you. You're good.
For the listeners, this is from a fantasy series. It's a
really good set of books, though. If anybody's listening and wants to get into some novels that are fun that is in the same world that we talk about, you should check out Brian Godawa. I'll stick a link in the comments. I'm making a note.
No, we really will. We
This guy
really
needs
will
to
stick
pay
a
us
link.
advertising.
He should.
Just look down there.
Yeah. But like I'm bringing it up, so I love that like that whole sequence of rescuing Lot and just whooping these kings, and then the encounter with Melchizedek, which we could spend all day on unpackaging. But then afterwards, like after this, probably traumatic ordeal where he's at war with the regional kings. After this, the word of Yahweh came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. Like he's, God came to him to, kind of comfort him after the dust settled, to remind him that he's being protected. But anyway,
I love that it was after the fact. It wasn't before.
Yeah.
It's just a reminder, like, hey, you did the right thing, and here you are.
Yeah.
But that's when he promises the heir, right?
Right.
And I think what's interesting about this kind of whole sequence is that he's I assume in his vision or whatever, he's taken outside because he starts looking up into the stars, and they start I'll just read right here. Then the word of the Lord came to him, this man will not be your heir, because he was complaining, he's like, I don't even have any kids, like my heir is one of the people who just live with me, like in the household, and when am I going to have kids? And he's like, hey, don't worry about that. And he took him outside. I'm sorry, go ahead.
It is worth noting that like their concept of immortality wasn't like going away to an afterlife as a disembodied spirit. It was progeny. Like God is making this extremely generous promise to give him all of this land, and he's like, well, what good is that to me, because I'm not going to enjoy it because I don't have kids. It's really an interesting
good point. It's kind of a thing that I personally in my own life is the only thing that I care about these days, is just kind of my legacy of my family moving on. I think some of my favorite things to do in the world is just sit and watch my granddaughter put together a puzzle. Like something that easy, and something that is just so fulfilling to me, that I just know that she's strong, she's healthy, she's part of me, and I will live on for however long this ride takes us. And it's kind of a super comforting moment / feeling that.
Of course, their concept of immortality grew with Revelation, and we're promised resurrection. But it's important to note the starting point, the foundation of that. So,
well, Dre, there just reminded me, there was this video I saw, and it was this young grandparents, and they were young, like maybe mid-40s grandparents, and they're at a picnic. And they're just making this ridiculous big deal. They're clapping for their grandbaby who's picked up like a potato, right? And they're like, yeah, it's a potato. And then the camera pans to their parents, the great grandparents, and they're like, it's a freaking potato, shut up. Like,
And then it probably pans to their kids like, yeah, where were you on that when I was a kid, Dad?
Right, yeah, exactly, yeah. It was just really funny. Like the great grandparents are like, really, we're cheering at a potato? Like, knock it off. First time, kind of deal. Like,
I imagine that if my 3 kids were my kids today, with all that I know, I've been such a better parent. Holy smokes, been way better.
Yeah, but that takes out the you're not going through all of your own personal struggles that you were going through when you were raising those kids.
Right.
Like, I mean, we were the same age when we had our kids. We were children.
Yeah.
That's why I'm holding off.
I get it. Like Dre and I we were literally teenagers when we had our kids. Like not technically literally, but ostensibly. Yes. We were idiot kids, and our kids got to be raised by kids. And
I basically would be a senior in college,
Right.
living in the dorms, being a parent. That's kind of the equivalency of
Yeah.
my life trajectory at that point.
Yeah, we didn't do so
Yeah.
bad.
So
No,
I
I
interrupted
think
you.
so.
You were talking about an
No, I think when he's taken outside and he looks up into the sky and count the stars, and if you can indeed count them, then he said to him, "So shall your offspring be." And just kind of in the ancient Near East, at the same time, like not only is that the quantity of your offspring, but also the quality because of what we thought of stars back then, and kind of the up
oh,
there, the up there and out there. So
the
I don't know
stars.
I don't know if that's really what it's saying there, but it just kind of hit me like,
Mm,
hey, not only are you going to have that many, but you're going to have the quality of stars
That's an interesting
as
point.
children.
yeah,
That's a cool read, Dre. I
they
hadn't thought of
worship
that.
the ancient world worshipped stars.
Yeah, they saw them as Elohim or celestial
Right.
beings, right?
Yeah,
Or what do they refer to them a lot of times as the hosts of heaven?
yeah.
Right. And then the very next verse, and this is the verse that just I got stuck on, was Abram believed the Lord, and he credited to him as righteousness. So the word believe there, kind of we had a whole podcast on the word faith, and I think that's kind of what that means is it's a trust, and then knowing that what this God said, he is who he says he is, and that's his belief. And because of that, God saw Abram as righteous, meaning he's right. And to me, at this point in time, it means that he backed the right horse. He backed the God. He chose the right God. And at that point, without all of these systematic and this kind of mechanical Christianity that we kind of have today, the bottom line is, do you believe who the right God is? Are you worshiping the right thing? Are you or the right person? Uh, it just kind of that verse kind of poked out at me, like,
Yeah.
hey, and because where that led me was, you know, uh, that belief was it was brought up in Romans 4, Galatians 3, James 2, where it talks about Abraham's faith, and that and if you go from Genesis 15 backwards, they didn't have this system of sin management or forgiveness or the hope of a savior or the hope in a coming Messiah. All they had was righteousness. And to me, with all these, that's the bottom line. And then all these other things are a means to be or stay righteous. That's this kind of a thought that just popped out when I looked at Abraham. Because what was the promise of salvation before all of these? This is 500 years before the law of Moses. And we talk about the law, and then the Jews had their whole story from, if you read the Bible from left to right, all the way up into the New Testament. But if you add the Messiah, if you add, a savior, if you add forgiveness, if you add sin management, does that take away choosing the right God? And I think no, it doesn't. And even Paul, I think when we start, I think today Paul might walk me like, hey, I didn't say undo all the things that Abraham did. I just said that, now, I have more information than Abraham had at that time. I don't know, Brian, if you have thoughts on my train of thought there.
Yeah, and I think like what Paul was saying is that like that faith, and it's not, it's not doctrinal correctness. It's not faith in an institution. It's not faith in your church or your upbringing or any of that stuff. But it's it's trust. It's a personal relationship of like taking God's side even against your own sin and against everything else. So you're taking up you're enlisting in his cause. You're investing in him. That's more fundamental than everything else. And like, righteousness, when Moses talked about, do not say to yourselves who will ascend into heaven to get this for us, or who will descend into the deep to bring it up from us. No, the word is very near you. It's in your mouth and in your heart. He's speaking of the law. He's talking about fulfilling the law through faith. It's not that the law is there to be like there's a sense in which it's there to show you that you are in fact a sinner by your inability to keep it. But at the same time, if you're trusting that the one who gave it to you for your own good, you uphold the law by that faith. But like the issue that Paul is addressing is that people put their trust in the fact that they kept the law, in the fact that they were of the blood of Abraham, or they trusted in the fact that they had the temple. Like I always go back to that conversation between in John 3, where Nicodemus, who is a member of the Pharisees and a ruler of the Jews, i.e. a member of the Sanhedrin, who came to Jesus at night and said, Rabbi, we know you are a teacher who has come from God, for no one could do the signs you're doing unless God was with him. Nicodemus had every expectation that he was going to come and talk to this man of God, and they were going to just kind of chill and speak as equals, because you're a man of God, I'm a man of God. But all the things he was trusting in were superficial. They were cultural signifiers. He was trusting in the fact that he belonged in the correct category, like he had the right religion, the right God on paper, the right institutions and rituals. But Jesus told him, no one can see the kingdom of God unless he's born again. You don't have faith. You don't have the faith of Abraham. You're trusting in all of these trappings. And so, yeah, it's, all of those things give you a better sense, inform your faith more than what Abraham had. But without that foundation, without that fundamental personal trust, none of it means anything. So,
it kind of reminds me of, the Great Commission. I mean, we had this instruction, but the main instruction was to make disciples.
Yeah.
All the rest of the instructions was kind of a means to what that is, right? It's like participle of what the verb is. The verb was, hey, go make disciples. Have people believe in the right God. Man, I don't think you're on, man. Can't hear you.
Yeah, there you go. And it kind of goes back to, I never thought about tying these two things together, but that kind of goes back to, you could do this big swirl, right? And it goes back to that verse, the conversation with the angel or Jesus, whoever it is, the word of God, with Abraham saying, look up at the stars. That's going to be what your descendants are, right? I mean, because Abraham is obviously, credited as the first tree of kind of coming down this path and what became Christianity. But you're right. Like everything, literally the entire New Testament is like, this is why I'm here. This is what's going to happen. And this is how you're going to do it. Right. And all of that is, I'm here to fix a problem, to set a new a process in place so that you all can go grow disciples. Right. And bring everyone into the kingdom of God. And then if you take that circle and continue to wrap it around with the divine counsel slant that says, to quote Paul, that don't you know you'll judge angels, right? Then that puts us in the host of heaven, right? Or amongst the host. And I'm not having this isn't about disembodied spirits. It's about a place in the world.
Yeah.
In the world view.
I get your meaning.
Yeah. Like it's almost like that's just one big damn circle. It's kind of crazy. And
Well,
it's
yeah, it's
And it's so
you know,
basic. It's so
right.
we
simple.
It's like, well, of course, one plus one
It's
equals two. Oh,
it's
oh.
so simple, but it's it's like losing weight, right? You know, it's really simple to lose weight. It's just hard. It's just hard to do. It's hard to execute.
That's a fair point. Yeah. Yeah. The function of weight loss is not, it's not mystical.
Right.
People would have
Just
you think it is.
it's
right.
arithmetic.
Well,
I'm
because
not.
now
I'm sorry.
now
Go
there's
ahead.
people that get paid to do it, right? So
Yeah,
I
it's.
think there's there's gatekeepers of the information
Can
that
you
really is simple.
can you? I'm not sure I see the parallel though. Can you
What do you mean?
wait
What part?
like weight loss to Abraham?
Oh, the parallel is like, are you following the right God, and are you making disciples? Like, it's really easy. There's lots of means of making that happen. There's lots of
Well,
avenues.
I think it's more difficult today than to make disciples than there's I think there's a lot of misinformation about what it means to be a Christian, to be a disciple. That I don't know. I don't know that it's that simple, but I think that I think if the church had that sense of what it means to make disciples, they would say they're doing it, but I don't,
See,
you
I
guys know
disagree with
where I'm.
that.
I disagree
I know
too.
where you're going. I
Yeah.
disagree with you actually on a couple of reasons. One,
Okay.
I disagree that it's hard. I think it's kind of like what Dre was just saying about weight loss. It's not hard to understand, it's hard to do. And there's a difference between those two things. I think a good church would be honest and open that they're not doing a great job at it. I think
Okay.
that's a conversation that my church has on a regular basis. It's like we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. And then that drives it why, right? Then that's the why. So what do we do about it? How do we get better? And then it becomes that circle that goes back to it's hard. But it's not hard. But it is hard, right? Like Brian, how many people are overweight?
I'm not sure where we disagree.
I'm disagreeing with when you said that they would tell you they're doing a good job. My point is, I don't believe that as many churches, the church, however we want to use that language, which bothers me, by the way. I don't think there's that many churches that honestly think they're killing it.
Well,
I don't. I think those few big ones do, right? The ones that will not be named. I think they think they're killing it because they are in a different way. They're murdering their business model. You know?
Well, it's business model. That's the key word there.
Yeah.
But it's I think that we're kind of like, it's kind of the default that like a good church recognizes that it's failing, or it's not doing a good job. But are they willing to make the changes necessary to do a good job? That's the question. And
There you go.
to tie it back to Abraham,
a donut tastes really, really good. You know that you're not supposed to put that in your mouth,
right?
If you're trying to lose weight. And I think that the church understands that I guess they're just habitual or in a rut, or it's hard to break away from what you're already doing. Plus simple things like pride. Who wants to be told they're wrong? Who wants to be told they're not? And what leader of an organization wants to be told that he's not doing a good job? Right? You got to double down and then fight that.
Well, and it brings us back to Abram. This is striking to me. The Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your people and your father's household to the land I will show you." Look, we kind of.
This is wild. Right.
Like that's we miss that you know, in the modern world, especially as Americans, where all of our ancestors came here from somewhere else, like that's a routine thing. But, you know, up until pretty recently, most people live their whole lives within 5 miles of where they were born. To go from your country and your people and your father's household to go to the land I will show you, that is that's enormous. You have like you know, most people, their entire identity and sense of security and place in the world, it's tied to their place. Like, you know, your extended family are all around, you know, everybody, to pick up stakes and go to a strange land where you don't you don't know what to expect. You know, and the reason that's relevant is, you know, we kind of have this, you know, people feel at home in the church as it is. They recognize, like, we need to make big changes to do what we're supposed to be doing, but we just can't execute. We're too tied down to the paradigm of the church that we have. And they recognize quite rightly that if you make too many changes, people are going to get spooked and they'll just go to another church. And it's very much driven by, it is very much an industry. It's driven by consumer demand, and the suppliers that meet that demand are the ones who are going to have the most market share.
You know,
Um,
we talked about this in my service this last Sunday. Everything you just said, my pastor addressed that. He talked about it, and he talked about, you know, he goes, people go to a church because they like the music. They go to a church because they like the pastor. They go to a church because they like the coffee. They go to a church for all these different reasons, right? And he goes, and they leave churches for all these reasons. Oh, I didn't like the music. I didn't like the singing. I didn't like the pastor. He goes, and it was funny because it's almost like he's been listening to us or we've been listening to him, because he said, you know, he goes, it's really everyone's job to move the church in the direction that it needs to be. And if the church isn't meeting those needs, then the church needs to be adjusted. And I thought it was really funny that we talked about it so much here. And that was kind of the message. It was like, hey, you know, don't leave if you don't like our song list. Come tell us why our song list isn't correct, right? And like, get us back on track, like hold us accountable. And it was really cool to have a pastor standing in front of his entire church body saying, hold me accountable.
that is admirable. Yeah.
Yeah. I've told you guys before, I'm really a huge fan of my pastor. I think he's a good dude. And I think he really comes to this in the right place. I mean, just the little things, like our church isn't big. We're not killing it revenue wise. He has a part-time job as a landscaper, and he also does the books for other churches because he has an accounting degree, right? So he does like their taxes. Now, he makes his own money doing other stuff, right? Like this isn't even his full income. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, and that's tough. And you see, most churches, they are, whether they say it in these terms or not, they're about getting butts and seats. I've been to churches where they're like, God's really growing us, and all these packed houses that shows God anointed us. But then you read things like in the Gospels, in Luke 14, I think, it says large crowds were following him. And so he turned and said to them, unless a man hates his father and mother, his wife and children, his brothers and sisters, can't be my disciple. Like he said the same thing on other occasions, but it was slightly more palatable. It was, if anyone who loves his father and mother more than me can't be my disciple. Here he's saying, if you don't hate your parents and your family, everything about your life, can't be my disciple. I think he was doing that to deliberately drive off half-hearted enthusiasts. He only wanted people who were committed. But we don't really have that. And I get the temptation. You got to keep the lights on. You got to have losing your congregation because you said something that's biblically true but uncomfortable and unpopular, that can affect your quality of life. I 100% get that, but and unless churches are willing to take that hit, then the church is going to, the church is shrinking, because people aren't, you keep hearing from conservative pundits and politicians about how we need to, we need to return to Christian values, and we need to turn back to God and Jesus Christ. 100% true. But my concern is that people will hear that advice, go to church, and what they get in church is this sort of kind of superficial, folksy wisdom with a Bible verse quoted here and there, but it's not really the word of God. They get like kind of a child's crayon drawing cargo cult version of Christianity, because it's kind of the normative version. And then they realize, well, there's nothing here of value. I'm not going to do this anymore. So I think, so unless the church itself makes those changes, then we can't. I don't think we're equipped to handle that influx of people who will want to return to God and Jesus Christ and Christian values. I mean, just returning to Christianity for its social utility will not itself save our civilization or the church.
Right. It's quite the opposite.
Then we don't have the same problem that Abram did, right? We don't have the which God do you follow issue, not ostensibly anyway.
Well, I was gonna, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
We do.
So,
it's just not as overt, right?
Right now we worship ideology or philosophy, and there's also a return to kind of some pagan deities that are kind of making their rearing their head back up from thousands of years ago. So I think in the Western world anyway, the Christianity, the one God, kind of won the day, and now it's a matter of, do you follow him or not? And
well, but it's easy to get to be distracted by like superficial categories. Like if you you can say, Muslims say that they follow the God of Abraham. Mormons say that they follow the same God as the Old Testament, and as we've discussed, labeling a certain concept of God as God is not the same as worshiping God. But I apply this as much to Orthodox lowercase o Christians as anybody. Like when to go back to it's all about faith in God. If your faith is not in God, everything else is for naught. But I always ask Christians, well, why do you believe this stuff? They'll we have all these kind of thought terminating cliches to sort of put the question off, but when you probe, well, why do you believe the Bible? Oh, because my church taught me that it's inerrant. Well, okay, well, how do you then? I guess the bottom line is, are you trusting God actually? Have you investigated and discovered that this is the word of God based on reason and evidence, or are you trusting in your institution that tells you these things? Because those aren't the same thing. Does that make sense? Like it's hard to
totally.
Yeah.
I think
I'm trying to be concise here, but
Dre, back to the comment you made.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you made a comment about, the Christian God, Yahweh, won the day, and now we're where we are, right? Two thoughts. One, it's a quote out of one of the Brian Godawa books that I want to read for the listeners, that I think it's relevant to this conversation. He said that the ultimate authority of a culture is its God. The deity provides meaning, sustenance, cultic religion, and law codes. And I think that's really, really more relevant than you would think of at first read of those two sentences, because in the ancient Near Eastern times, in the biblical times, it was like a direct translation, right? We worship this God. We're going to build an altar, a ziggurat. We're going to do sacrifices. He tells us what to do, and we do it. And that's the law of the land. That's what we do. Well, if you would look at where America is today, it definitely worships a God. It's just not named Yahweh. It's named diversity, right? Like our God is DEI. That's
come on.
that's the God of America. I mean,
we're clearly, or the communist Chinese would say we worship capitalism.
right.
We worship the almighty dollar.
But my point is it's really similar to, I go back to that, I forget the guy's name there for the listeners. Those are listeners that come from the place that the three of us come know exactly what I'm talking about. But there was a KGB agent that had a very famous debriefing in the early 80s. And he talked about the fact that America couldn't be beaten by another country directly, kinetically, physically, through direct confrontation. The only way to beat America was to destroy it from within itself. And it's almost as if that's the only way to beat Christianity also, is to destroy it from within. And it's happening. We see it with, is it the United Methodist? I forget which Methodist churches it is, which is really big on their DEI priesthood practices, right? I'm not going to get any further into that, but you all know what I'm talking about. But to the points that Brian's
the church to the to cultural values,
and that's the point you started to make earlier, Brian, when you said, if you are using social norms and social needs to be what you're considering religion, it's never going to work, right? And it's quite the opposite, because I'm kind of meandering now, but there's a point in my head. So if you guys will bear with me, and I'll wrap this up in 2 minutes because I'm looking at the clock. Children thrive with discipline and structure, and young parents like to always think that there's a better way, and it's to be more permissive and let the kid figure things out on their own. And that's just not the case, right? The kids become unhappy. They become frustrated. They don't feel safe. And I think there's something that even adults are that way, right? Because you look at how society is, and we're largely telling people today they can do literally anything they want. You don't like being a boy? Be a girl. You want to be a dog? Be a dog. It's fine. Nobody cares.
There are no absolutes.
Right. There's no rules.
You're God.
And people are less happy today than they were when there were tons of rules. And I think there's a takeaway there. And I don't know how to, I can't synthesize it right this second, so I'm not going to keep meandering with my thoughts, but I think you guys kind of get what I'm putting down. That there's our religious world has become so ill-defined that what is Christianity? Like, there's not even a structure that says this is Christianity now. It's like, that's whatever you need it to be. There's, pastors that are saying, you can do this and that. And, what was Dre, I think you shared one with some women pastors saying, we don't need Paul. And like, it doesn't matter what he said about women leading churches. And like,
they actually had a song for that.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to pick,
share that. That was
I'm not
wild.
picking that one out as a specific thing, but like either you're absolute with Christianity or you're not. And I recognize some people are listening to us and they're like, hang on, you guys are constantly prodding and pushing on the edges, but we're pushing on what the words actually mean in the true sense and the spirit. We're not trying to move a word so that we can get away with doing something that's technically evil or is wrong. And I think there's a difference there. Anyway, I don't know where all that meandering came from, but I felt like there was a point to be made there.
I mean, it's a story about a guy who broke off covenants with a God to join up with the one true God. And before there was a sacrificial system or coming of a Messiah or the righteousness before Moses existed, there was Abraham, and he made himself right with God, and that's a pretty good lesson for all of us today.
Right? Yeah, I'm with it.
Yeah. So thanks for watching or listening. If you have any questions on what we just talked about, or I know that there's probably about 50 different branches of rabbit holes we could have gone down just in that hour. If you have a question to talk about something specific, let us know. Send an email or the different means of getting a hold of us, which you can see some of them on the screen right here. And with that, I would say, what do we do? We stay enlightened. That's right. We stay enlightened
and curious.
And we're curious, and I want God to bless you and whatnot. So thank you very much, and we'll catch you next week.
And whatnot.
And whatnot.
Rockin', rollin', whatnot.
Take care, everybody.